This is Distant Replay, the podcast that goes back in time to relive all the greatest events that we witnessed in sports. From upsets, to championships, to cultural moments, we discuss it all. Coming up on today's episode.
4th down goal, under 2 to go.
It's the ball game right here. They got to make the touchdown.
Prescott. Incomplete. Ball goes over on downs.
We're taking you back to November 29th, 2014, the Egg Bowl. We're getting geared up and ramped up for another installment this week as we record this podcast. We thought, hey, let's pick a rivalry game out that would fit into this week. And we go Egg Bowl. Mississippi State, Ole Miss. If you don't know what the Egg Bowl is, those are the two teams involved in this year. You had maybe one of the best matchups in terms of these two teams, coaches, players. Maybe of all time, definitely in recent years, Mississippi State was number 4 in the country, Ole Miss 19th, this game in Oxford. So we got a lot to talk about tonight on Distant Replay Podcast. Let me welcome in Mike Noto. Egg Bowl, Mike, what do you know about the Egg Bowl before you watch this game?
What I know about the Egg Bowl is I only care about Ole Miss or Mississippi State football one day a year, and I usually do not care as much as I did this season because these two teams usually are not that great. But this particular season, these two teams were quality football teams.
They were very good, and we saw them firsthand. We'll talk about that as well. We're going to talk about coaches, great coaches in this matchup, players, the college football playoff rankings for the first time we're going on this season. Mississippi State, obviously, at 4th, was chasing those. We'll go through those numbers as well, plus take you back through the game because you see the score of this game. You might not think it was that competitive, but it was actually a pretty good game from start to finish. So we'll go through all that today. Let me remind you, the game can be seen in its entirety on our website, distantreplaypodcast.com. You can connect with us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Every show's up on YouTube as well. So this game, again, it's always played around Thanksgiving, the holiday, just like every other rivalry game in college football. And this one between Ole Miss and Mississippi State was one in which both teams were ranked, which hadn't happened a lot. This was actually the 5th time ever in the series history, which dates back all the way back to 1901 when these two teams first played at Mississippi State. So you go back over 100 years, and these two teams have only been ranked together at the same time 5 times. That probably doesn't surprise you, does it?
It does not surprise me because the 111th meeting of this game, right, the first game that you mentioned was called because of darkness. Mississippi State won that game 17-0. I love that. It's like a Little League baseball game called because of darkness. And I thought this was crazy that the last time this game was on broadcast TV, so not ESPN or a cable network, the last time it was on broadcast TV before this 2014 edition was 1964.
You love that nugget, don't you?
Yeah, I love it, but it also hits on how unique this game was in terms of how these two teams entered this game.
And look, in fairness to the rivalry, Mike, I don't want you to totally throw the rivalry to the side. Because, look, there's only a couple opportunities to be on network TV, broadcast TV. You got CBS every week, which SEC's on. But then beyond that, maybe an ABC bowl game or two. So they've been put up against some big rivalries in the SEC. It's been tough, and plus there's always been one team that's really lagging behind. So this is a perfect storm, and it got them on to CBS. And Vern even pointed it out. First time you're on our CBS Game of the Week broadcast, which is pretty crazy to think about, just because it's a rivalry. No matter, you would think one year that these two Mississippi schools would be at least relevant enough to where they'd want to showcase this rivalry because this has some really good matchups. But nope, not the case. This is the first time. So
hey, Ben, I feel like I need to respond to what you said before. I want all of our Mississippi and Mississippi State fans to clarify something for them. I always watch this game. My point is, it was nice to see these teams relevant on a national scene during this 2014 season.
Fair enough. Well, I'm glad you clarified that for us.
There you go.
The Egg Bowl, by the way, just the history of the Egg Bowl, early on, when Mississippi State dominated the series early on, Ole Miss pulled an upset, won 7-6 in 1926, okay, back when they were the red and blue. They stormed the field, tore down the goalposts. A&M fans did not take it very well because they were trying to destroy their property. Some A&M fans defended the goalposts with wooden chairs, Mike. Wooden chairs. So because of this, all these fights breaking out, both students of both schools came together, said, hey, let's create the golden egg. This large trophy will be handed out to the winner of this football game every year since 1927.
And the history of mediocre matchups commenced.
The name was actually not given the Egg Bowl until 1979, but the trophy's been there for a long time. So let's look at this game itself, 2014, and let's talk about each one of these teams, Mike, because I think what's unique about this is the coaches, players, and the seasons for each one of these to get to this point to where these teams are actually on, the game of the week SEC. Start with Mississippi State. It's Dan Mullen, who's an up-and-coming coach here for the Bulldogs. On the other side is Hugh Freeze. Now, you might have a different impression of Hugh Freeze currently, but at this time, this game featured two of the maybe biggest names in coaching that most of the country probably didn't know about. These guys were huge up-and-comers at the time.
Yeah, these are two up-and-coming head coaches coaching these two teams at the same time. And I you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I can't remember where we had two coaches on the come-up at these two schools at the same time. And I think it brought a new dimension to this rivalry. And I think was a big reason why, they sort of were in the national spotlight.
Yeah, I think you're dead on with that. And you had a Hugh Freeze who had coached under Malzahn, been at Arkansas State, had a good offense, was, very, very hot name. And plus he was born in Oxford. He had grown up nearby. He had gone to Southern Miss for college. So he's a Mississippi guy. So he fits in perfectly with this game. Dan Mullen, he didn't have the same background. He's from New Hampshire, but he adopted this rivalry and adopted what it meant and really treated this game with that passion when he first got this job in 2009. And now, he's been there and kind of established himself at Mississippi State. And I think about this time's kind of when he's kind of getting these, getting his name's kind of mixed in with a lot of the openings that come open in college football at this time. So as soon as a program comes open, hey, what about Dan Mullen? Do you think he could be the name for this? And, eventually he did find that job at Florida. But yeah, at this time, he's kind of known as a guy that he didn't recruit at the same level of Hugh Freeze. He didn't have all the big name guys necessarily and a lot of the 4- and 5-star players, but it seemed like he was always able to get a lot out of his guys at Mississippi State. As
the old saying goes, he coaches them up,
Yep.
And you hit it on it perfectly. You kind of knew Dan Mullen, even though by this time he had been at Mississippi State for a little bit, but you kind of knew that this was going to be a stepping stone to probably a bigger SEC job for him. Hugh Freeze, I mean, we all know what happened to Hugh Freeze since at Ole Miss, but he was the kind of guy, like you said, from Mississippi. You kind of thought maybe he'd be at Ole Miss for a long time period.
Yeah, and you had no reason to believe otherwise. But he made a bowl game as soon as he walked in the door at Ole Miss, and this is a program that was still, was struggling at the time, and just kind of has a good year every 6 or 7 years, it seems like. But he came in and turned them around out of the gates, and in this season specifically was kind of like the highlight. He'd kind of had some guys in the system already. He'd already had some big recruiting classes that if you didn't follow college football closely, you might not have been aware of. But if you were in those kind of recruiting circles and, followed guys on message boards a lot, you kind of started wondering, how's Ole Miss and Hugh Freeze going and getting guys like Laramie Tunsil, right, to the Kimdichis? How is he going out and getting these guys to come to Oxford without a lot of success in that program? So you kind of thought, okay, hey, maybe some things are a little bit fishy. But to your point, he had taken that talent and he was getting this program going.
Yeah, and all right, so two things about this. First of all, Hugh Freeze. If you take a step back and just look at his college football reference page, right? He's at Ole Miss. He had 4 straight winning seasons, got better each year. 7 wins in 2012, 8 in 2013, 9 in 2014, and 10 in 2015. So when's the last time you saw Ole Miss string together 4 years like this where they're not only getting better, but they have winning records? Now, to his recruiting practices. I'll never forget, I don't know if you remember this, but when we started talking about Ole Miss being good during this time period, automatically what came out of your mouth was that they may not be doing things on the level recruiting-wise. It was just like you were right on it. So it makes me think, like you said, those message boards and sort of people in the know kind of knew maybe what was going on from a recruiting perspective with Hugh Freeze and Ole Miss.
Well, I don't think I was out of the I wasn't like ahead of the game necessarily because there's always the stories on message boards. Oh, I can't believe this guy got if you ever lost a recruit, it's because your opponent was cheating, right? I mean, if you ever got a guy, it's because they loved your school, they valued what you stood for, right? They were all about the family that your school represented.
Of course.
But 2013 though, Mike, it was like he got national headlines because he was able to pull. Robert Kimdichie was one of the big names. He's a guy out of Georgia that, Alabama, I think Georgia, Auburn, all these guys were in on. He flipped last second, signed with them on signing day. Then you had Laramie Tunsil. You had the nation's number one wide receiver in Laquan Treadwell. I mean, he's pulling in the number one guy like every position, Tony Connor. And it was like, whoa. Ole Miss is fifth in the country in this recruiting class. What just happened?
Yeah, and look, no surprise because Kimdichie, Treadwell, and Tunsil all went on to the NFL with varying degrees of success. But you got to put yourself back to when these guys were recruited. Like Ben's saying, they were huge recruits. Huge.
Yep. 16 players rated 4 stars or better in this class. So there's no surprise by this year, 2014, this program's finding it's kind of elevated itself to spots it hadn't really been before. They start 7-0. This season. An incredible start. I was actually at the Alabama game in Oxford when College Game Day was on location. I mean, all the hype and excitement was around this program. Katy Perry was at the game. She was on the video board multiple times. They ended up pulling off the upset over Alabama in that game. And it was just kind of the start of what was something special for them. And at that point, they vaulted from 11th in the country to 3rd in the country. But they won back-to-back games against Alabama and number 14 A&M. And that A&M game was on the road at College Station. So they were like a legit number 3 team in the country heading into mid-October.
I remember that Alabama game. That was a game in like September, right?
Yep.
Yeah, because it was, I remember that being an early season game and obviously being a huge surprise. And like you mentioned, I mean, these 2 Mississippi teams this season, I mean, I think it's key in that division when either Alabama, who obviously doesn't happen that much at all, or LSU is a little bit down. That's sort of when it's Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Arkansas. It's kind of their time where if they can catch lightning in a bottle and be good during a time period where one of those teams are down, they can really make a mark. And that's what both these teams did this season.
Yeah, and just to kind of further elaborate on the season, this was a 7-0 start for Ole Miss. First time since the Johnny Vaught era. Okay, so if you know anything about Ole Miss football, Vaught Hemingway Stadium, Vaught's that legendary coach like a Bear Bryant, a Shoke Jordan, these guys, these names that are kind of in lore in the SEC, he's that guy for them. So they were at this point where they're reaching the upper echelons. Like their glory days of Ole Miss football is back. Win over Alabama. Now, they roll into October, and they're feeling pretty good. They actually, during this season, it's pretty crazy to think that Ole Miss would climb that close to being number 1 in the country. But they kind of had a setback, losing to LSU by 3, then the big game against Auburn in which they lost by 4 points, and that's the one where Laquan Treadwell had that gruesome injury at the goal line.
Everyone remembers that injury. There comes a time in these podcasts, if you listen enough, where I find it weird you're listening to the podcast if you don't know something about the game or the teams involved. I would imagine almost every person listening right now is aware of that Laquan Treadwell injury. It's one of those injuries that's rare because it happened at such a crucial point in the game. And Treadwell actually ended up fumbling when he got hurt, and it magnified it even more. I kind of liken that injury to the college basketball player on Louisville, that Kevin Ware. Remember when he got hurt in the Final Four? Yeah. Kind of the same thing, like a game, high stakes, center of the action, and something completely unfortunate happens.
Right. Ole Miss would actually go on to lose another game against Arkansas. So they lost 3 SEC games in a row before this Mississippi State game. So all the good fortune, the good feelings were just about gone at this point. And they were still ranked, though, after these 3 losses because Auburn was 24th. Auburn was 3rd. LSU was 24th. So they were still ranked 19th coming into this game. Now, on Mississippi State's side of the field, we mentioned Mullen, this Mississippi State Bulldogs team. It's crazy because it's only been 6 years, but it still seems hard to believe that the Mississippi State Bulldogs were ranked number 1 in the country in late October in this season, Mike?
Not only late October, Ben, November 15th, 2014, 2 weeks before this game. Do you remember where you were?
I believe I was inside Bryant-Denny Stadium. Do you remember where you were?
Yes, I remember I was sitting right next to you. So me and Ben attended at number 1 Mississippi State in Tuscaloosa against, I believe, Alabama was like number 4 at that point.
Yeah.
Because they're coming off the loss again to Mississippi earlier in the year. What a game. What an atmosphere. What a game. From what I remember, Mississippi State had chances to sort of capitalize and beat Alabama, but they couldn't do it. And great night in Tuscaloosa.
Do you that was your first game down there, right?
You know what? I was trying to think of this. We went to an Arkansas game, and I can't remember if that was the year before or a year after.
Yeah, I can't remember either. I kind of remember it being your first because I was like, who would have thought your first game down to Alabama, you would have been seeing the number 1 team in the country, and it wasn't the Crimson Tide. But you got to see Mississippi State number 1 versus Alabama, who was actually number 5 at the time. But who would have thought that would have been a top 5 matchup? Because I think we put it down like in the summer, and it's like, we can probably get you tickets in this Mississippi State game fairly easily. Why don't you go ahead and book that one up? And then come time for the game in November, game day's there. It's all eyes are on that game, and it's a 25-20 loss for Mississippi State. Their only loss up to this point in the season. So they are number 4. I mean, they didn't drop very far because of this. And you look at this is the first year at the college football playoff rankings too, which everybody's like, well, how's this going to play out? What's going to happen? Who's going to jump who? What's the committee think? Who knows? But the Bulldogs found themselves in this week ranked 4th behind an Alabama. So Alabama probably going to be the SEC championship game. There was, that was at stake in this game as well. Oregon, Florida State, and then you had that group behind them, TCU, Ohio State, Baylor. And the thought was at the time, if Mississippi State doesn't make the SEC championship game, can they still get in? Because that was a big question. Can you lose or not make your your conference championship game and get into the playoff? Well, we didn't get to find out, but that was a big conversation.
Yeah, that was, so you remember, like Ben just said, this is the first year of the playoffs. So a major focus of this broadcast is, sort of going through how this game is going to impact Mississippi State. Not only if Mississippi State wins, but how much do they win by? Will that influence the committee? A major storyline during this game for Gary Danielson and Vern Lundquist.
This is the last regular season week of the year. I mean, you're a week away from the SEC championship and all the conference championship games. And to think that Mississippi State's ranked 4th at this point in the college football playoff, I mean, they're that close. And I think, who knows what happens when we get into this at the end of the show, but it's still hard to believe they were that close to a playoff berth, especially where you consider where they've been the last couple of years. But I digress. So this matchup, great coaches. Let's talk about a few of the players in this game, and we'll stay with Mississippi State. I think the big name was Dak Prescott. You go back and we know who Dak is now. I don't know if anybody thought he'd become the NFL caliber quarterback he's become, but you go back to this. For a team that's ranked number 1, were you surprised at how few players, how many names you did not recognize on this team at all?
For sure. So the 2 names you do recognize, though, are now like top flight NFL players. So you had Dak leading the offense and Chris Jones now with the Chiefs, of course, the defensive tackle for Mississippi State. So you recognize those 2 names, but I honestly didn't recognize any other names. And that is, we talked about Dan Mullen and his coaching staff coaching people up, right? So give them credit for that. And Dak Prescott, he had over 800 yards rushing this season heading into this game. I don't think of Dak as a scrambling quarterback at all now. I mean, I know he utilizes his legs when he needs to, but it's crazy the transition he's had from college quarterback, better passer than a runner, but still a very, very established runner in college, to where now at the pro level, he's a drop back passer first and foremost.
The only other guy, the one guy that I really remembered, and I remember more than you probably did because of the SEC and whatnot, but Derano Wilson, who had a big game, and the receiver for Mississippi State. He's a guy that was out of Birmingham originally, so kind of aware of him there. But you probably heard this on the broadcast multiple times. He was actually Mr. Basketball in the state of Alabama in 2013. And, that connection from Prescott to Wilson was pretty dangerous. I'm kind of surprised that Wilson's not a guy that we don't know about more. He's a 6'5" receiver, speed, size, great hands. Like, you watch this game and you thought, man, this guy's got a pretty bright future ahead of him.
Yeah, he had a very good game in this game, as we'll get to.
So those are just some of the names on Mississippi State, not many. Again, on the side of Ole Miss, I already hit a couple of the guys that you're aware of in that recruiting class that came along. But on the other side, offensive side of the ball, a few of the big names. Beau Wallace, the quarterback. Evan Ingram, the tight end, who's gone on and still having a nice career. Those are a couple of the names that just jump off to you, especially with Beau Wallace, because he had like the ultimate Ole Miss name, right? Beau Wallace, and he had the bangs and everything. Like, he looked the part. Central casting, as you would say.
Yeah, he's one of these quarterbacks that played, was a senior still in college, started a lot of games. His name is Beau, you know what I mean? So very identifiable. I think sometimes I forget about Beau Wallace because Chad Kelly followed him, didn't he?
Yes.
Yeah, so when Chad Kelly follows you, it's kind of from a personality standpoint, he sort of overshadows anyone before him. But once we got introduced to Beau Wallace in this game, I remembered immediately who he was. And look, I mean, is Beau Wallace the best quarterback ever? No, but he's one of these SEC quarterbacks where you get to know him over the years, and he's feast or famine. He's sort of like a Jameis Winston of the SEC. Where you have no idea what to expect, and it makes it an awesome watch.
Yeah, his bad games are awful, and his good games are great. Like, there's rarely in
Gary
between.
Danielson was very, very funny in his assessment of Beau Wallace throughout this game.
Yeah, we'll get to that here in just a second. So those are your two rosters. Anything else to sit out to you with these rosters, Mike, or these two teams? Anything else you want to hit on before we get into the game?
No, let's do it.
So this game, of course, CBS, as you would imagine. We already talked about Vern Lundquist in the call. It seems like Vern, again, is on every show that we do. And Gary Danielson, a great team. Really, it's fun going back and listening to him. We always rag on Vern in the moment back in these years. But, man, you can't beat these two when they come on with an SEC game.
Yeah, I know. I mean, they're tried and true. We've gone through it many times on this podcast. They're just the best.
So some thoughts. We'll go quarter by quarter, some thoughts from each quarter. First quarter, their injuries seem to be kind of a theme in this game. Mississippi State loses one of their top cornerbacks early on after just a couple of plays. Jamerson Love gets hurt. You can see Ole Miss is aggressive in this game. I mean, Ole Miss and Hugh Freeze, whatever you think about him, off the field maybe, and some of the stuff, his image that he's kind of maybe tarnished a little bit through the years with the NCAA investigation and whatnot. The guy is a great coach and always fun to watch because he's a guy that is going to take chances. Right, he's going to come up with a great game plan, and you can see out of the gates that he's going to be aggressive in this game because they go for a fourth down around midfield. I mean, it might even have been in Mississippi State's territory or Ole Miss's territory, and they take that early chance there. They convert it, but you can kind of tell he's setting the tone early.
For sure. Hugh Freeze is going down guns blazing in this game. You could just tell early on, like you said. Look, Hugh Freeze, for all of his indiscretions, the guy can coach football, and his teams are going to score points. No matter how, I don't care if he's at Liberty or when he was at Ole Miss or wherever he ends up in the future. He's just one of those guys.
Yeah, Ole Miss is taking shots early. What did you think about? They came out, they're talking about the Land Shark defense, and that's what Ole Miss was. I don't know if Ole Miss still does it or not. It was, during this era with Hugh Freeze, and they had some good defensive players, and they were the Land Sharks. They'd put their hand up in front of their forehead as like a fin. You probably loved it when they came out of the break and showed Miss Mississippi and Miss Teen Mississippi getting honored on the field, and Oxford doing the Land Shark on the field. What were your thoughts of that?
So the Land Shark. So obviously I think it's very annoying and strange, okay? But with that said, if I'm an Ole Miss fan and I'm really good like once every decade, I love the Land Shark.
Fair enough. So that was early on in this game. There's, out of the gates, kind of back and forth. Both teams not doing anything. Ole Miss puts together a pretty good drive their second time down, but Wallace, your boy, after a good drive, he's got him moving, throws a pick in the back of the end zone. Not a great throw, but I think just a really good play by State there, and it kind of stops the drive early.
Yeah, Beau Wallace, who's obviously hurt, like his ankle, he's straight up hurt at the beginning of the game, not even as the game goes on. But that's Beau Wallace's career in a nutshell, like we talked about. Great drive to get them down there, interception in the end zone, and like you mentioned, that was a good play by the Mississippi State defensive back.
The other great storyline, the kind of side storyline we get into this game that we get a first little taste of in this first quarter, we get a studio update, and it's Florida State and Florida going on at the same time. Remember, Florida State is right here undefeated. I think they're the only undefeated team at this point in the season, and they're playing Florida. And the first update we get, Jameis Winston's thrown 2 interceptions in the first 5 minutes.
You know, Jameis is one of those guys. I mentioned him before. I don't know why he even turned the ball over a lot in college. And it makes you wonder, like, why didn't the football community sort of see that maybe he wasn't going to translate as well as people thought to the NFL? I guess they just loved the arm strength, I guess.
He was a gunslinger, but that would become a recurring update throughout, and it would just continue to go on. And I'll update you as we go forward. But had that update. A couple of 3-and-outs for State to start. It seemed like State could not kind of find its rhythm. They didn't have great field position early on. Couldn't hit any key plays early, so they just couldn't really get into a groove at all. And we kind of see the rivalry. This is already a great atmosphere because of how good Ole Miss had been, because of how good Mississippi State is at this time, 2 ranked teams. We kind of get a little taste of the rivalry, the chippiness, a big punt, big hit along the sideline, right in front of the bench. Guys come out, a lot of chirping, a lot of talking. And that's when Gary's chopping in. Hey, this is the rivalry. You love the Egg Bowl.
The Egg Bowl, baby. Come on. I mean, this is all kidding aside. Like these SEC rivalries, I mean, this is what it's all about if you're a college football fan.
Absolutely.
The SEC rivalries, the Big Ten rivalries, any of these interconference matchups where to those people in that stadium and the people watching in Mississippi on TV, this is the most important thing in the world, and it's awesome.
Yep. Ole Miss, so they got the ball back. They kept firing too, man. Big play to Ingram over the middle. We see Ingram a couple times in this game with some big plays. Tackled down at the 1-yard line. This guy could not get it in this game, Mike. He had the big plays. Somebody else would end up getting rewarded for it.
Yeah, so a big theme of this game is Mississippi State big offensive plays, and this is the first one to Evan Ingram. This is the first offensive play for Mississippi after the Wallace interception. So Hugh Freeze goes right back down the field to Evan Ingram. Beau Wallace runs it in for a touchdown to put Ole Miss up 7-0. And at the end of the first quarter, it's still 7-0. And Ole Miss is beating Mississippi State in the offensive yard category 135-16.
Yeah, it's all Ole Miss early. I mean, they're moving the football, possessing the football too. And you see State getting some offense together, starting to drive as the quarter ends. A couple plays into it, they have to settle for a field goal, knock a 45-yarder through. Nice little field goal there. They had a nice little update too from Allie LaForce in that, kind of, again, showcasing what the rivalry is all about. But I guess like that week, at some point, I don't remember the story at all. I don't know how big it was outside of, maybe Oxford, but she had a story about there was a letter that was signed Hell State, right? That's what they say, threatening to damage the campus. So, like, she was showing they had extra security around the Grove or whatever. Like perfect SEC rivalry story.
Yeah, just out of nowhere in the second quarter, Allie LaForce drops that on us. And again, a part of the fabric of SEC football. Now, you mentioned the Grove. So for people, again, everyone listening to this knows what the Grove is, but it's basically educate me on the Grove and what it's like to watch a game at Ole Miss.
It's like their quad essentially, right? I mean, it's beautiful, a bunch of old oak trees and, just green grass and just tents set up everywhere. It's, they're known for tailgating. They always say Ole Miss will lose the game, but they're going to win the party. That's what always happens over there. You go over there, everybody's friendly, taking shots, have a beer, grab some food, some pimento cheese, whatever it is, and you have a great time. So it's a perfect pregame and even like postgame kind of spot to be. And nothing kind of captures what a college football atmosphere is like except the Grove. I mean, I should say except. Nothing captures it like the Grove does. It's an awesome atmosphere, one that everybody's got to experience, and that's why when game day I got the opportunity that year to go down there, it was like such a huge deal because they had never gotten that chance because Ole Miss is never good enough typically, and they had that opportunity. So yeah, so the Grove's a huge deal. Very good explanation. And pimento cheese, huh? Yeah, I've been in a pimento cheese kick lately. I've been so maybe that's why, because I've been eating it since the Masters was played in November. Oh, that's a Ben George thing, not a Grove thing. No, it is a Grove thing too. It's a Southern thing. Pimento cheese is a Southern thing. Okay, gotcha. But I think it was on top of my head because I've been eating a lot of it because of the Masters in November. So that's probably why. Also in the second quarter, again, Ole Miss up 7-3. Another injury, Vince Sanders, wide receiver for Ole Miss, has a big tackle on the sideline. He's out of bounds, and the State defender kind of slams him to the turf. It seemed like a little bit late. They didn't talk about it all in the broadcast, but he suffered a knee injury on that tackle, and it seemed like it could have easily been something they called flag for unnecessary roughness.
Good point.
Did you think that at all? I thought that it felt late.
Yeah, it did feel late. And in a quarter where there was not a ton of action, that definitely stuck out.
Yeah, well, that's the truth. No action hardly at all in this first half, especially this first quarter. Again, another theme that you kind of see in this game, Dak getting a lot of pressure trying to pass. If he didn't get the ball out of his hands quickly, it seemed like he was having to move the pocket, scramble, get outside. He did a good job, though. I thought I really kind of noticed his composure, his patience. He wasn't a guy that you see a lot of times at the college level when they get pressure, they're quick to tuck, put their head down, just try to get back to the line of scrimmage. He was a guy that got pressured throughout, but he would kind of slide out of the pocket, roll out, keep his eyes downfield, look for a guy, make some good throws. You could kind of see those pro-level skills on display, even though the numbers weren't great.
Completely agree. So his composure and patience was great throughout this game. He sort of stuck to it. If he had a bad play, put it behind him. You're right. Those are traits that he now, as a pro quarterback, really help him out a lot. When we watched Dak in this game, though, I still can't believe how much better he's gotten, though. Right. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's like night and day. It's incredible.
We got to keep in mind, he's still a younger guy at this time. I think he's a junior in this game, I believe. But the biggest thing was, he wasn't – it's not like he came out of high school as some top quarterback. This is a guy that Dan Mullen brought in. Dan Mullen kind of mentored a little bit and coached him up. He's a quarterback whisperer, they say. He's still early in kind of his progress, but you kind of saw throughout this game the teachable moments that Dan Mullen had. And when he did make mistakes, Dan Mullen was quick to bring him over. Hey, here's what you need to see. Here's what you did wrong. Here's what you want to do next time. And he seemed very coachable.
For sure. That trait, you could tell from him in this game, is that those little intangibles that he's at the top end of the NFL. I mean, that's a great combo for Dak, right?
Yeah.
His intangibles are there, and he has the arm ability now in the NFL, and that combo is very, very hard to deal with for NFL defenses.
So halftime ends, it's 7-3. Dak has 64 yards passing. This was, I think, the worst offensive half of the year for Mississippi State yardage-wise. Nothing's going right, but, it's 7-3. Despite everything being on the road in Oxford, you get the ball back, I think, early in the half, start the second half. You're feeling pretty good about where you stand, even though you hadn't played well at all.
Yeah, this is a half that, although, like we mentioned, there's not much action, Ole Miss, starting with that Beau Wallace interception in the end zone, they had chances to expand this lead. And you're right, if you're Mississippi State, you feel great.
So State comes out, puts a great drive together, early third quarter, takes a 10-7 lead, their first lead of the game. And then we kind of start picking it up. Now, I guess some offense that we were kind of hoping for. Hugh Freeze, Dan Mullen, back and forth. Ole Miss comes back, another long pass to Ingram. I don't know how he got tackled in this game down at the 1 yard line. He looked like he had broken away. This was 60+ yards. Looked like he was on the run. Nobody was going to catch him. And next thing you know, he's tackled at the 1 yard line. Ole Miss has to punch it in again. But Evan Ingram, huge plays, but you look at his box score and you're like, man, the guy didn't score at all.
Yeah, Evan Ingram. It's he pops out on this in this game as far as being a very, very athletic tight end. He sort of, for his position on a field now. These are two top 20 teams in the SEC. There's athletes everywhere. He sort of sticks out as being a great athlete, and it's funny to say that, but then he got caught twice, inside the 5 yard line on huge plays.
5 catches, 176 from in this game, but no touchdowns. And I guess he kind of filled in that gap where, maybe Treadwell. They had some other pretty good receivers there, Cody Core, Vince Sanders. But I just think that he was that guy that kind of stepped up and became a popular, very good target for Beau Wallace, and in this game he had some big plays there. Again, back and forth again. State hits a long pass. It's kind of a back and forth, just shot after shot after shot. State, though, this drive just basically killed them. They drive down the field. They're deep in Ole Miss territory, down 14-10, chance to answer, show, hey, we are the 4th ranked team in the country. We're going to answer the bell again here. Third quarter of this game on the road with everything on the line. And they had a chip shot field goal. This kicker just kind of chunked right. And it was just like, oh, man, after all that work and a missed field goal like this just sucks the life out of you.
It really does. And, it didn't help that Dak pulled a Marino to the kicker's Ray Finkel here. and the laces were in on that hold by Dak Prescott, who was also the team's holder, but still probably a kick the kicker should make. And did you notice after the missed field goal, the Ole Miss player slapped the kicker on the helmet as he was running by?
Yeah, you like that?
I'm surprised he didn't get a taunting penalty.
Well,
Are you?
yeah, I mean, maybe it's more of I would say it's more of a pat on the head than a slap.
Yeah,
you thought it was more aggressive than that, huh?
I don't think it was a hey, get him next time.
Well, I think it was I think it was a sarcastic, like, good job, buddy. Definitely could have been a taunting, but yeah, they didn't call it. But I thought that was funny too. They caught that on the replay of that. But hey, it's a rivalry, Mike. These things happen, buddy. You can't pull the flag.
Everything goes out the window.
Exactly. And again, I credit Hugh Freeze. He was aggressive. Any chance to kind of expand the lead, kind of bury Mississippi State. He tried to do the same thing on this next drive. Got down the field. He's still taking shots. Not conservative at all. A lot of times you're a team that's kind of an underdog in a rivalry game, and you have a chance to win late. You start kind of, hey, let's hand the ball off, let's eat some clock. But Hugh Freeze wasn't about that. They added another field goal at 17-10 with 4 minutes left in this quarter. And, Ole Miss, it's still a 7-point game, but they feel like they're in control of this game.
It feels like at this point in the game, can't stress enough, it feels like they're in total control. And Evan Ingram, again, another 35-yard pass to Evan Ingram on this drive. And we're seeing good Beau Wallace right now. We're seeing him make complete big plays in the passing game. His completion percentage still isn't that great.
Right.
But he's connecting on big plays. And, we head to the end of the third quarter, which I think was very telling.
Yeah, the final play, or one of the plays later in this quarter, was probably the play of the game. I mean, Ole Miss got the ball back, but they're pinned back to their 9. Mississippi State's got a chance with their defense to make a play down 7, get the ball, even worst case, get a stop, get the ball back around midfield, got great field position. Well, instead, Jalen Walton, who had a big game, but really, this was the carry that kind of carried most of his yardage. He shifted gears, changed the directions, went right, was stopped, turned it back left, and then made a great cut upfield, broke a tackle, and then he was gone. 91 yards down the field for a touchdown, and that was a backbreaker, 24-10.
Yeah, unlike Evan Ingram, he did not get caught from behind.
No.
And I can't believe I didn't remember this run, because this was a great run.
Yeah.
I mean, this is one of those epic runs that I'm surprised they don't play, like, on the lead-in to nationally televised games. It was that good. Look, you put it actually perfect that this was a backbreaker. I mean, this was just a great, great run by Jalen Walton. I don't think you could over-exaggerate it enough.
And I don't remember this game a lot when I was going back to watch it. I don't remember this play really, like you said. But at this moment, I'm kind of like, man, this game pretty much over. Like, I didn't expect a whole lot in the fourth quarter. But the game actually delivered. It was actually a much better fourth quarter and a whole lot tighter than I thought it was. And it kind of starts off because Dak kind of gets going a little bit. And Dak was hit or miss in this game. Didn't have a great first half, but he had some really nice throws and then some throws that weren't great where he kind of hopped into a guy or threw him low. But he had 2 great throws, including a long one down the sideline. Derano Wilson make a beautiful catch in the end zone, jumped over a guy, pulled it in, got possession, feet down, all that stuff, and a beautiful catch to add that touchdown. And, it's 24-17. I thought what was funny about this, though, Mike, and they pointed this out in the broadcast, the PA system was so loud in this game. You could hear everything over the broadcast. But when they came out of review, I mean, classic, if this doesn't tell you how it means more in the SEC, then listen to this. As they come out of this review, and Gary and Vern are, like, explaining what happened, you hear the PA announcer, this official review presented by, and I think he named like a law firm. I don't remember who it was now, Johnson and Schwartz. And they both, the guys on the broadcast, even talked about it on there, which never happens. Did you just hear the PA? This is sponsored official review, but that's the SEC, man.
Yeah, I have in my notes to talk about for outdated that the PA system sounded like a high school. When you're at a high school game and you're like, whoa, the PA sounds kind of weird and it's really loud.
Right.
When it shouldn't be. That's how it was during this game. That's a great point. And one thing on Dak, you mentioned how they sort of picked up the pace in this first drive of the fourth quarter when he hit Wilson for the touchdown. The only other time they really picked up the pace like this on a drive was right at a halftime,
right,
when they scored a touchdown. And you go back and look and say, wow, Dak was really, really good in these, up-tempo kind of situations. And that's something that did carry over to the pros.
Yeah, and I think they even mentioned this on the broadcast, especially later in this quarter. Mississippi State still being very methodical, very patient. And to your point, like they had success playing a little more up-tempo. You wonder why they didn't, because I think Danielson even mentioned like this is the same way in that Alabama game. Like they got down and they didn't. And I guess it's maybe a good sign they held their composure, but at some point, if these things are working, why don't you do it more? I think it could have maybe worked in this game potentially, but yeah, those situations, Dak did look pretty good. Ole Miss, 2 great plays coming back a few drives later. They kind of go back and forth here, but again, aside from that Walton run to end of the half, or into the quarter rather, these 2 consecutive plays of Ole Miss in the fourth, were if that wasn't the backbreaker the first time, this was it. You had Jordan Wilkins, who was kind of a reserve player, only had a couple carries in this game, but he had one long one for 41 yards. The very next play, they run a halfback pass through Jordan Wilkins, a beautiful pass. I mean, perfectly thrown. Cody Cord in the end zone, and that, if the first one wasn't a backbreaker, that was like, okay, Ole Miss is going to take this game.
Yeah, big plays for Mississippi. We said it at the top, and this was the story of the game. Okay, look, they scored 4 touchdowns in this game, right? The first touchdown was set up by a big pass to Evan Ingram. The second touchdown was set up on a big pass to Evan Ingram, right? The third touchdown was the Jalen Walton touchdown run. And now the fourth touchdown is a big Jordan Wilkins run, like you mentioned, and then a halfback pass of all plays.
Yeah.
And on the money pass by Jordan Wilkins.
Yeah, it was. Beautiful. State, again, offense not doing a whole lot. Ole Miss is trying to put them away, but Mississippi State gets the ball back. They're driving. Like, they still have a chance. There's 4 or 5 minutes left. They're moving the ball down the field, touchdown, onside, all that stuff. Maybe you have a chance. I don't know, but you kind of see the drive. They're putting something together here. There's one moment, though, too, where Prescott takes a huge hit on a play that was whistled dead. Like he started scrambling. Play was whistled dead. I mean, it's so loud you can't really hear it, so you don't really fault the defender. But Prescott lets up, and when he does, the defender hits him low and basically flips him. He kind of lands awkwardly and a little slower to get up, and it's like, man, like I guess you can't call that, but that seemed like a pretty big moment.
It's one of those plays when it happens, like you mentioned, you couldn't hear the crowd, you couldn't hear the whistle because of the crowd, and it's one of those plays when it happens, you're like, wow, I'm surprised that doesn't happen more.
Right?
It stuck out because it's so rare that happens. But yeah, that felt like a very important moment in the game, even though, it kind of happened when Mississippi was in control.
And you talk about play calling, then the very next play after that hit, they run Dak Prescott on a quarterback keeper on the 3rd and 6, and they get 0 out of it. So interesting play
call, especially from a guy like Mullen, who is a good offensive coach. That was perplexing, and Gary Danielson was all over it.
He was. Any chance Mississippi State had to maybe make this close and have a chance? They get down to inside the 10, take a few shots to the end zone, 4th down, 5-yard line. They turn it over on downs and a throw again out of the back of the end zone. And I think Dak, again, probably made a few mistakes here, really not giving his receivers any chance, basically throwaways in this moment. And any chance they had was it. And at this point, the crowd's going nuts. An atmosphere there with this team and this win, they now the number 1 team in the country and number 4 team in the country at home. They're feeling pretty good in Oxford.
Yeah, we talk about this. We talked about this on other shows too. You got to put yourself in the shoes of an Ole Miss fan. I mean, how many times in the season have they beat 2 top 5 teams? Not to mention just knocked their arch rival out of the college football playoff. During a very exciting game at home. Yep, the Grove is going to be fun after a game like this.
A lot of bourbon getting poured that night, Mike.
And pimento cheese.
And pimento cheese. And deviled eggs, right? Some of that too. Let's see. So game ends 31-17. Prescott had a pretty good game, numbers-wise, 22 of 37, 282 and a touchdown. Beau Wallace is 13 of 30. Those 13 completions went for 296. No touchdowns, though. 1 interception in that game. Evan Ingram, 5 catches, 176, as I mentioned. Derano Wilson, 8 catches, 117 for the Bulldogs. So overall, good win for Ole Miss. And, This season could have been something really special, I think, without an injury, with Treadwell, a couple breaks in this game. I mean, 2 one-possession games they lose before the blowout to Arkansas at that point when they had the injury and kind of things had unraveled. But they got it back together for this game and closed it out 31-17. And for Mississippi State, Bulldogs, heck of a year. You win all those games, you get to a good spot, but, nothing to truly show for it. They did end up getting a Peach Bowl berth, Mike. So, not completely lost, but where they were when this game was played, were they thinking, okay, if Auburn beats Alabama, we beat Ole Miss, we get into the SEC championship game, we're going to be propelled into the playoff more than likely, to losing that game, then going to play, I said Peach Bowl, I meant Orange Bowl is actually they ended up, a better bowl. They ended up playing Georgia Tech, losing that game 49-34. So kind of a disappointing finish to where these Bulldogs were.
Hey, an orange looks like a peach, sort of. So don't worry now. No, just kidding. But I'm the last one who should be pointing out when you make a factual error. But anyway, yeah, look, it makes it worse for Mississippi State that they lost to their rival. That just makes it sting even more. Now the Ole Miss fans have bragging rights for the the year leading up to the next Egg Bowl. So yeah, as much as this one was great for Ole Miss fans, it hurt just as much for fans in Starkville.
For Ole Miss, this team would go on from this game, and they were the ones to go to the Peach Bowl. That's where I got it messed up. They played TCU, by the way. Do you remember how this season played out, Mike, in the playoff?
I don't.
You're not familiar with this? Man, this would even make a really good episode because of how this thing finished out. Now, you probably remember Ohio State won the first college football playoff.
With Cardale Jones?
With Cardale. Beat Alabama, was the 1 seed going in. They beat Alabama in the Sugar and then would go on to win the national championship. But did you realize this is the week where Baylor and TCU both had 1 loss, sitting at 5-6 in the standings? You had an Ohio State team that was 1 loss as well, right behind them, and they were playing Wisconsin team.
I think I remember.
Remember that? They had to basically essentially
and they
jump.
Crushed them, right?
Yeah, they shut out Wisconsin, but they had to jump essentially TCU and Baylor there to close out the year. When you look at all things considered, there was a huge debate over whether or not, because TCU they finished out their season on a high note, won every game, won them by big margins, did nothing to tell the committee, hey, maybe this team has some weakness or two. But TCU still got jumped by Ohio State late in the season with that win over Wisconsin. So pretty crazy. But TCU ended up playing Ole Miss in the Peach Bowl. I mean, what is that? How about that for a consolation, going to the Peach Bowl to play Ole Miss? And in that game, they won 42-3 over Ole Miss. So maybe TCU was pretty good.
Yeah, TCU was good. Hey, but in fairness, Ohio State was obviously really good too. So
yeah,
there are years when there's 5 or 6 good teams, unfortunately.
Yeah, doesn't happen all the time, but that was the case for this one. All right, Mike, what else? Outdated, what do you have? Anything for me?
I didn't see much. I didn't see too much outdated. Did you?
I didn't really see anything either. It was, the game's only, 6 years old, not a whole lot to it, not a whole lot different than what you'd see on an SEC broadcast right now. These 2 teams are 2 coaches, by the way. So Ole Miss, follow Hugh Freeze at Liberty now, having a great year at Liberty, probably going to end up with another good job. But all the games, all the wins this year for Ole Miss, 9 of them were all vacated because of the sanctions by the NCAA in 2016. So everything they did accomplish this year wiped away essentially. And Hugh Freeze, though, on the verge of probably getting another opportunity pretty soon because of what he's done at Liberty.
Oh, for sure. I mean, if you have a big-time opening, you're giving Hugh Freeze a really good look. Are there any SEC openings potential that he could be in the running for?
South Carolina's open now with Muschamp. And then, there's talk. I think Hugh Freeze even said something about Tennessee this past week. That's the job he'd want. I don't know. I didn't see this story. I don't know if he actually came out and said that because that would be kind of, against the unwritten rules of being a head coach, calling out somebody that's still got a job.
For sure.
But, Tennessee, the way it struggled, could be an opportunity, and that would really be interesting if it ended up at Tennessee. I think wherever he goes, he's going to have success. And if they ever have the name, image, and likeness get passed, and these guys can actually get paid for their efforts, he might even be in a better position at that point. So interesting to see there. And, of course, Mullen doing great things at Florida. So no surprise watching this game to see what these 2 head coaches are doing right now.
Not at all. And we hit on it at the top of the show. 2 up-and-coming coaches. I mean, I don't – with the way this rivalry looks now, I mean, even look now, right? You have Kiffin and Mike Leach. 2 name coaches, right? Good coaches, retreads. This is the only time I can remember this rivalry where you had 2 up-and-coming coaches leading these programs, and it showed on the field. The level of player in this on the field during this game was better than I don't know when you're going to see it in an Egg Bowl again.
Yeah, I think we're all looking forward to this game this week. I think it was people thought 2020 would be an interesting game with Leach and Kiffin, but I think more Mississippi State's kind of been a letdown in year one. We'll see what happens with the game and where it goes, but this rivalry always has something interesting up its sleeve, and for this game, it was Beau Wallace, Evan Ingram, and Hugh Freeze leading the way for the Rebels, upsetting number 4 Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl 2014. That'll do it for us here on Distant Replay Podcast. Thank you for listening. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, do that. Please rate and review the podcast as well. We would be extremely thankful for that. We are thankful for everyone that's listened along the way so far. And don't forget, the game will be up on our website, distantreplaypodcast.com. And also, Mike, very active on Twitter. Connect with us there. We'd love to hear from you. Distant Replay Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Every show up on YouTube as well. So, Mike, thanks for going back to the Egg Bowl with me and experiencing a little bit of SEC football once again.
Great time as usual, and until next time.